Somewhere in the Imperium are entire planets where nothing has breathed for centuries. No cities running, no wildlife, no sound. Oddly enough, that's not what makes these worlds interesting. It's that the Imperium keeps sending people back to them, on purpose, over and over. So this isn't really about what a dead world is. It's about why anyone would ever go there. Who actually decides a world is dead? Nobody. Just looks at a planet and calls it dead. Somewhere inside the administratum, survey records are updated, and the world is officially logged as a dead world. That single word changes everything about how the Imperium treats the place. No tithe grain gets demanded from it. No governor gets appointed. No defense fleet gets assigned to protect a population that isn't there. A dead world effectively disappears from most of the Imperium's bureaucracy the moment it's logged, which is exactly why it becomes so easy to quietly use for something else. That single filing decision can outlast the reasons behind it by centuries. A planet can sit in the records as dead long after the truth on the ground has changed, after a mining company has moved in, after a garrison has set up permanent barracks, after a Mechanicus outpost has quietly grown into something closer to a small city under glass. The paperwork doesn't always catch up. In the Imperium, a classification is often less a description of what's currently happening on a world, and more a description of what nobody's bothered to update. Picture two different planets. One of them was never anything else. Wrong orbit. No magnetic field. Nothing but rock and vacuum since the day it formed. It's been silent since before humanity existed, and it'll stay that way, regardless of who shows up. The other planet had cities on it last year. That's the version that should unsettle you. When the Imperium can't win a world back from chaos, from Xenos, from a rebellion too far gone to put down, it has a final option. Cyclonic torpedoes. Virus bombs. Exterminatus. The order doesn't come from mercy, it comes from arithmetic. A world lost to the enemy can spread. A world turned to ash cannot. The Imperium doesn't weigh how many die in the blast against how many might have lived. It weighs one planet against every planet near it. Not every world stripped this way even gets the formal dead world label. Some are left as rubble fields, some as quarantine zones nobody's allowed to log at all. But the most infamous example wasn't even an official imperial order. During the Horus Heresy, loyalist elements of the traitor legions were trapped on the surface of Istvan III when Horus turned virus bombs on his own men, rather than let their loyalty spread. What was left afterward wasn't a battlefield anymore. It was silence, with the outlines of streets still visible under the ash. Some worlds don't even survive as worlds at all. Nostromo, homeworld of the Night Lords, was left to die when its own Primarch turned its sun against it, burned to nothing, as a final act of contempt for the planet that made him. Cadia went the same way on a far larger scale. The Imperium's most famous fortress world, the gate that had held the galaxy's biggest warp rift shut for 10,000 years, didn't get quietly reclassified as a dead world when it finally fell. It was torn apart entirely, reduced to a debris field with a name people still recognize. Ironically, that's often the more common outcome than a clean exterminatus. A world doesn't get labeled dead so much as it simply stops being a world. Krieg sits closer to the line, without fully crossing it. A 200-year atomic civil war left its surface an irradiated wasteland unfit for anything to live on in the open, and yet people still do live there, just not on the surface. Entire generations of Death Corps soldiers have been born and raised in bunkers beneath a world that, by any surface reading, should already count as dead. Krieg is proof that the line between dead world and world that's merely dying very slowly can be thinner than the classification admits. Most dead worlds, though, never get a name like these. They get a designation number in a survey ledger, and nothing else logged, filed, and forgotten by everyone except the crews, who eventually get sent to work on them. On paper, this should be a dead end. You'd assume a lifeless planet is worthless. In reality, it's the opposite. A dead world is one of the only places in the galaxy the Imperium can use, without asking anyone's permission. No population to feed, no governor to negotiate with, no rebellion risk, because there's nobody left to rebel. Every living world the Imperium controls, needs something from it: grain, taxes, loyalty, soldiers. A dead world needs nothing. It just sits there and absorbs whatever gets built on it. In a galaxy this overstretched, requiring nothing from anyone is its own kind of value. That's why dead worlds don't get abandoned, they get repurposed. If nobody can live there, why do people keep going back? Because the ground itself is still worth something. Some dead worlds sit on mineral deposits that would take years of political negotiation to extract from a populated planet. Here, there's no farmland to protect, and no labor disputes to settle, just mining complexes, stretching for hundreds of kilometers across bare rock, visible from orbit as scars long before a ship even lands. Crews live in sealed domes and count their air in shifts, not days. But mining isn't even the strangest use for a planet like this. The loudest silence in the Imperium's some dead worlds become firing ranges. The Imperial Guard needs somewhere to run live drills with real ordnance, and a planet with no population is the one place entire armies can rotate through, leveling ridgelines with artillery, without anyone having to answer for it afterward. Careers get spent training on ground that was never meant to hold anyone permanently. Years of a soldier's life, shaped by a planet that will never remember them. And in the ruins that are sometimes still standing cathedrals, with the doors frozen mid-swing, hive spires taller than any mountain range, still visible against a black sky. Mechanicus survey teams pick through the wreckage. Not to reclaim the planet, just to see what's still worth cataloging before it's forgotten completely. Can a dead world ever come back? Rarely, and never cheaply. Terraforming exists in the Imperium's technical repertoire, but reversing a planet's death is an enormous undertaking. Atmosphere processors, generations of slow ecological seeding, entire fleets of Mechanicus vessels committed to a single world for decades. Most dead worlds simply aren't worth the investment. The ones that do get reclaimed are usually sitting on something valuable enough to justify the cost. And even then, reclassification is a bureaucratic process that can outlast the project itself. And even a successful reclamation rarely produces anything close to what the planet used to be. What comes back is usually a thin, fragile version of a living world, enough atmosphere for limited unprotected activity, enough soil to grow a single hardy crop, nothing like the biosphere that existed before whatever killed it in the first place. Nobody terraforms a dead world back into paradise. They terraform it back into barely survivable, and call that a win. Who else comes looking? The Imperium isn't the only one interested in a planet nobody's watching. Rogue traders operating on the fringes of Imperial space have used dead worlds as way stations, quiet places to resupply, repair, or meet contacts without an Imperial customs fleet asking questions. Pirates use them the same way. For the same reason, nobody patrols a planet that officially has nothing worth stealing. And a dead world isn't automatically safe from chaos, either. A planet with no population to corrupt might seem like a strange target, but an empty world is also an unguarded one, a place where a cult or a warband can dig in for years before anyone from the Imperium notices anything's wrong. Some dead worlds also carry an orbital presence that has nothing to do with the surface at all. Void stations, refueling platforms, and shipyards can circle a planet that's completely lifeless below them, using its gravity well and its position on a trade lane without ever touching the ground. To the crews stationed on those platforms, the dead planet beneath them isn't a mystery or a warning. It's just scenery, the thing their orbit happens to be built around. Dead, but not alone in being dead. Dead worlds aren't the only planets the Imperium marks as lifeless. They're just the most literal version, and sometimes the label hides more than it reveals. A death world looks similar from a distance, except everything there is very much alive, and every bit of it wants you dead. A dead world, everything already lost. A death world, everything is still fighting. Some worlds catalogued as lifeless turn out to be Necron tomb complexes, a planet's entire population asleep underground for millions of years, right up until the day it isn't asleep anymore. Some go quiet a different way entirely. A tyrannid swarm arrives, strips every scrap of biomass off the surface, and leaves behind something that reads on every scanner exactly like a dead world. Because functionally, it now is one. And some worlds don't stay empty at all, left unguarded long enough. A planet can be claimed by chaos and twisted into something with its own kind of life, one the Imperium would consider far worse than silence. Even the hazards vary underneath that single word. Some dead worlds are just vacuum and cold. Others carry lingering radiation from whatever killed them, toxic dust storms that eat through void suits, or crusts left so unstable by orbital bombardment that the ground itself isn't safe to stand on. Sometimes the hardest part isn't figuring out that a world is dead, it's figuring out whether it only looks that way. Very few people are ever born on a dead world, even fewer grow old on one. Everyone who sets foot there arrived on a contract, an order, or a research posting, and everyone is counting down to the day they leave. Mining crews rotate on fixed terms, because nobody's lungs last a full career on recycled air. Guard regiments finish their drills and ship out to wherever the real war is. Mechanicus teams sometimes stay the longest of anyone, because a dead world doesn't argue and doesn't need faith, just data. Out there, a torn suit isn't an injury, it's a countdown. Every person stationed on one of these planets knows exactly how long they'd have, and exactly how far help would need to travel to matter. That knowledge changes how people behave. Discipline on a dead world tends to be stricter than almost anywhere else in the Imperium. Not because command demands it, but because a single careless mistake, a cracked seal, a skipped equipment check, doesn't just risk one life. It risks everyone nearby who has to stop what they're doing and try to save it. On a planet with nothing to breathe, the smallest procedures become the difference between a normal shift and a burial detail. Nobody moves their family to a drilling platform 300 kilometers from the nearest town. Either people fly in, work the shift, fly back out the site, produces enormous value, and holds zero permanent population. On purpose. A dead world isn't really a planet anymore. It's a resource with a gravity well, and the fact that the Imperium has this many of them, some born empty, some made empty on purpose, some only pretending to be empty at all, says something about how it solves problems. When a living world becomes too dangerous to keep, the Imperium doesn't always find a way to save it. Sometimes it just subtracts the world from the list of things it has to protect. And yet the people who pass through still carry their lives with them the whole time they're there. Crews finish shifts and write letters home. Guardsmen call a training posting on a dead rock just another year of service. Somewhere, a survey team member stands over a ruined chapel on a world nobody remembers the name of and takes a moment before moving on. A dead world doesn't need anyone to live on it. It just needs someone willing to visit.